Hey everyone, it's Dr. Zora here and welcome to SkillCapped's guide to playing Sova in Valorant. We have looked at some of the top pros currently playing Sova to provide you with the best Sova guide that you won't find anywhere else. By the end of this guide, you'll have learned tips and tricks on Sova's abilities that nobody has seen yet, the best positions to use each ability, tactics to open up sites for your team, and so much more. All this information will be backed up by demonstrations to ensure you understand each tip and trick provided. Alright, enough with the hype, let's jump right into the video. First off, we need to talk about Sova's role on the team, which greatly impacts the way you want to play this agent. Sova is an initiator who is expected to set up the team to challenge positions and push away attackers and defenders. Information is one of the key aspects of having success in Valorant, and Sova provides exactly that. His abilities help to gather information on enemy locations, and with that information you can better identify the best site to attack or identify the most likely site that attackers are going to play. You can then find the best way to attack the site based on enemy positions, and on defender side you can rotate your team earlier to the site that the attackers will most likely hit. So when playing Sova, you should always have this in your mind. You want information, so use his recon bolt and owl drone to get that information that you need to get the edge in the rounds. First off, let's go over Sova's signature ability, Recon Bolt. This is the most important ability that Sova has, as it's his main way of gathering information for the team. Recon Bolt is an arrow that you can throw to the ground, walls, or objects, and the arrow will then send out a sonar signal that will identify any players that fall under it. The sonar signal will be sent out 3 times, and each signal lasts about 2 to 3 seconds. With Recon Bolt, you want to throw it in an area where you expect potential enemy players to be at. If you identify players while on defender side, you'll want to lean yourself and your team more towards that site where you found those players. On the attacker side, you want to try to identify where the defenders are positioned so that you can better challenge them to open up the site, and if no one is spotted, you can then push you and your team closer towards that choke point. Be careful in assuming that there aren't any players near the area where you shoot your recon bolt though. Enemies can have enough time to find a wall or corner that they can hide behind, and once the recon bolt has ended, they can then get back to the position that you thought was clear in a matter of seconds. So make sure not to completely convince yourself that a certain choke point is clear just because your recon bolt didn't identify any players. There may still be someone in the general vicinity who can push back after the recon bolt has ended. One other note to be aware of is that the sonar signal will not go through objects or walls. So if you shoot a recon bolt and there is a wall in the way of an enemy player, that player will not be spotted, and you may trick yourself in believing that the area or site is clear and be met with an unpleasant surprise. Because of this, whenever you throw your recon bolt, you want to shoot it pretty high. This is so that the recon bolt can cover as much area as possible with as little objects in the way that would interfere with the signal. This is the key concept to understand with recon bolt. Not only does this help to cover more ground, but shooting it high will also make it more difficult for enemy players to destroy the arrow, giving the ability more time to trigger and identify where players are located. An all too common mistake that players will do is they will aim the recon bolts at the ground, in which it's very easy to take out and also is likely to miss a valuable information, as there are so many objects that can be in the way and block its vision. So the main concept to note is to throw recon bolt as high as you can. We still have more information to know about this ability though, and yes, we're going to talk a lot about recon bolt, but again, this is the most important ability that Sova has, and there are multiple tricks you need to know to fully utilize this ability. So with recon bolt, you have 3 charges that you can load up before shooting the dart, and each charge will increase the distance that the bolt will go. If you hit the 3 charge, the arrow will essentially shoot straight forward and hit the area that your crosshair is targeted towards. With the 1 and 2 charge, you'll get less distance, but the arrow will also fall down with further and further distance due to gravity. This is important to consider, as you may want to aim a little higher or lower if you go for a charged recon bolt that's less than max. Another note with recon bolt is you can make the arrow bounce by hitting right click. You can get recon bolt to bounce up to 2 times, and this is very useful for when you don't want to expose yourself to hit the ability where you want it to be. Instead, you can bounce the ability on another wall to hit that area that you want without risking getting killed. Now, to take this ability to the next level, we're now going to go over some lineups that can grant you very valuable information with little to no risk. There are a ton of lineups out there. I wouldn't suggest trying to memorize all of them, but knowing 2 to 3 lineups per map can be incredibly useful. First up is an arrow on Haven that you can use to identify players that are in Garden and can be very difficult to shoot out, granting you free information if the enemy players decide to step through this area. To perform this arrow, line yourself up to the edge of this window, and then you want to actually look at the arrows that appear on the bottom part of the screen. Line up this arrow with the second line below this roof and fire a 2 charge. Hit a tree and then grant you this information, and since it's so high, it's very difficult to shoot down before it starts to reveal players. On Ascent, there is a very useful arrow you can use to identify where a majority of the A defenders are positioned. Tuck yourself into this corner of the box here and then aim your recon bolt at the top left corner of this tower. From here, shoot a 3 charge arrow. This recon bolt will spot out practically the entire A site. It spots out anyone close to the A long as well as players in the middle of site or heaven. If you want to get a little bit more off guard, you can shoot this arrow a little lower as well. The lineup is the exact same, but instead of a 3 charge, you're going to jump, and at the highest point of the jump, you're going to shoot a 2 charge arrow. This arrow will land a little lower, which helps you get more of hell as well as garden like we mentioned. Next, on split, there is a fantastic arrow you can fire to get early information on the potential A push. Line yourself up to the middle of the entranceway to rafters, and from here you want to find this lamp in the background and go just above it until you hit the bridge. From here, fire a 2 charge recon bolt, and this will identify any potential A attackers. This is a particularly useful arrow than what most players use, as it gives a lot less room for attackers to hide from it. Lastly, on bind, there is a great recon bolt you can use to cover a majority of the A site. Stand behind these boxes out of showers and line your crosshair up with the tip of the tallest leaf you can see. From here, fire a 2 charge arrow. This will catch any players that are in the middle of the site, thus forcing them to have to reposition to somewhere that's less optimal. It's important to note that this arrow won't fully cover U-Haul or Heaven, so make sure you still check these choke points for potential enemies. We're going to go through more on Recon Ball in just a moment, but I want to go into Sova's next ability, which is Owl Drone. This is the next biggest ability that Sova has and is incredibly valuable to get tons of information, which is why it's worth 300 credits. It can actually cover more areas than Recon Bolt, however it moves very slowly and makes a lot of noise, so enemies will be able to hear it and adapt their positions to avoid being spotted. It can also be shot down early by enemies to avoid giving too much free information. With this drone, you can also shoot a dart out that will reveal an enemy's location for a short period of time. This is very useful for forcing the player to have to back away, which creates space for your team to push and take control of a site or choke point. We're going to go into the best times to use this Owl Drone, but one more note with this ability that a lot of players aren't actually aware of is you can actually raise and lower the Owl Drone up, which makes it even easier to try to position yourself prior to using this ability to get the information you want. All you have to do is press space to raise the drone and control to lower the drone. One example of how this mechanic is useful for the Owl Drone is in B links on Ascent on the attacker side. Rather than having to come to this corner and Owl Drone around the wall, this will take a significant amount of time and would decrease the amount of distance you can cover with the drone. You can instead raise the drone straight upwards to save yourself some time and get right into the middle like you intended, thus allowing you to get deeper into the enemy locations and identify where the players are at. To wrap up Owl Drone, the best times to use this ability is when you're trying to gain control of the map prior to attacking or defending a site. Going back to Ascent, another simple drone that you can use is a drone from B Garage to try to identify where players are positioned on the site. This will then make it much easier for you to attack the site now that their positions have been revealed. Make sure that you do stay a safe distance away from where enemies can be with these Owl Drones though, as some enemy players may decide to push you when you use this ability and you'll be a sitting duck. You can press the ability again to get out of the drone early, but there will still be some delay that gives the enemies an upper hand if you're too close to them. Next is Sova's ability, Shock Bolt. There isn't too much to say about this ability. You throw an arrow and it will burst in the area that it lands and deal damage to whoever is in its area of effect. Each shock bolt will do approximately 70 to 80 damage if you're in the direct center of it, so it's not a hard hitting ability, but it can do a ton of poke damage that can then make it easier to rifle players out. Similarly to Recon Bolt, you can also bounce this ability, which can be very useful to safely identify areas that you wouldn't be able to normally access. For example, if you suspect a player to be hiding cubby on Ascent, you can shock bolt that area to clear it out and bait any players there to peek out and get themselves killed. If you suspect someone to be B halls or control room, you can use a single bounce to hit those areas without exposing yourself to enemy fire. The next most useful way to use shock bolt is to stop a spike plant or to prevent someone from defusing the spike. Just like with Recon Bolt, there are lineups that can allow you to hit common areas of the map, such as the default plant spots on each site. For example, to get A sight on Haven, what you want to do is line up with this wall when the crack starts to show, and from there aim your crosshair at the bottom of this yellow pin on this room. Once you have this lined up, use one bounce on shock bolt and then jump. At the highest point of this jump, fire the shock bolt to hit the default plant position. On Ascent, a really useful shock bolt you can use is on the default plant spot on A. To hit this spot, you want to bunny hop up to the top of the wall here. From here, go all the way to the right and then look up at the sky for the tip of the crack that's in the background. From here, fire a one charge arrow and you'll get the default spot while also being safely away from enemies that may push A long. For bind, there's a great shock bolt you can use to safely defend the default plant position on B. Make your way over to window and from there line yourself up with the second line of bricks going from right to left. From there, place your crosshair just a touch above the boxes and just a touch away from the outline of window and fire a single charge shot. Just like that, you have a very safe way of denying the defenders from defusing. Lastly, on split, there is a great shock bolt you can use for the default spike position on B. Tuck yourself into this corner at spawn and look for the horizontal line on the wall here. Go into the very middle of these three outline boxes and then go just a touch above and fire a fully charged bolt with one bounce. With this arrow, you'll either delay the enemy's plant or will get a lot of chip damage and potentially a kill. A unique way to also use shock bolt is to counter Cypher's trap wires. If a trap wire is placed, you can shoot a shock dart that will actually break them. This is one of the reasons that Sova has started to be used more often. If you know where Cypher likes to place his trap wires, you can shock bolt in that general vicinity and it will break and render Cypher a lot less useful. Last but not least, we have Sova's ultimate, Hunter's Fury. This ability will allow you to shoot a powerful arrow blast that goes through the entire map. Anyone that lands in line of Hunter's Fury will get hit with 80 damage, and if they get hit, their location will be outlined for a short time, which can help with identifying where you may want to fire the second shot. You can get up to 3 shots with Hunter's Fury, and you really want to get information prior to using Sova's ultimate. Otherwise, you will be ulting without any idea of enemy locations and you're likely to miss your shots and waste the ultimate. To properly use Sova's ultimate, you first want to get information on enemy locations, and you can achieve this with Recon Bolt or Owl Drone. Recon Bolt is the easier of the two abilities. Once an enemy is identified by it, you want to fire your ultimate immediately so you can properly track it and hit your opponents. The first shot will usually be easy to hit, but from there you want to track which direction the enemy is moving after the first shot and move your crosshair in that direction to fire the second shot. Usually these 2 shots will do the trick, but enemies will sometimes switch directions to try to throw you off, making you miss that second shot. If the second shot misses, it is likely that the enemy has moved the opposite direction, so on the third shot, you want to go farther to the left or right to try to catch that player there. This is the best way to use Hunter's Fury. You can do the same with Sova's Owl Drone to get that initial information, and if you land the dart onto the enemy, which again will reveal their location and make for an easy hit with your ultimate. Now that we have all the abilities down, let's go over the crucial first round buy at the start of every half. Sova's abilities are actually extremely powerful during these pistol rounds, the reason being that players won't have full armor or any armor at all, so his shock bolt can be incredibly useful for doing poke damage that will make it easier to then kill enemies if you don't have the best aim to get that headshot. With the shock bolt, a body shot will do perfectly fine. Because of this, you usually want to get at least 1 shock bolt, an Owl Drone for information, and then light armor to give you some added protection to prevent getting one tap. To wrap everything up, we're going to put everything together and show how a typical round looks like on the attacker side and defender side when playing Sova. On the attacker side, you want to gather information on enemy locations. What you usually want to do is fire your recon bolt early at a location that players potentially could be in. If that enemy is found, you may be able to overwhelm that player or catch the player while they're distracted. Once your team is able to attack a site, you want to use your Owl Drone to scout out players that may be there, but also for your team to push with. The Owl Drone will act as a great distraction in which your team can then eliminate the enemy players while the enemy is distracted by the ability. Once the spike has been planted, you want to try to use your recon bolt if it's up again to safely identify enemy locations and increase your chances of winning the round. On the defender side, you want to do a similar sequence of abilities to obtain information on where the attackers are. Regardless of where you're playing, you want to fire your recon bolt again to get that early information on where players might be. If you spot enemy players early on, you can then follow your recon bolt with shock bolts to slow down the push and give your team ample time to rotate. If you don't see any players, you still want to stay in place but lean towards another part of the map and utilize your owl drone next to clear out another part of the map. You can see with these two abilities, we just cleared out A and then we cleared out a good part of mid, so the enemy attack is likely going to be B and you can adjust your team accordingly. Do be cautious though, as these abilities won't completely clear everything, so it's still possible that there were gaps in the vision you obtained. Alright, so what is your favorite map to play Sova on? Let us know in the comment section below, and while you're down there, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to get more premium guides just like this one with one goal in mind, helping you become a better player. We here at SkillCapped want to thank you for watching. We'll catch you in the next. I'm Dr. Zora, and good luck out there.